We are the Mistakes, aka Madison Doyle, Jesus Camarillo, and Zare Martinez, and of course my name is Joey Barra, and today we will be discussing the social exchange theory. Okay, so according to this theory, relationships can be described in terms of their rewards, costs, profits, and loss. So of course, the social exchange theory can be seen in all types of relationships, from romantic relationships to friendships, but we're going to be focusing on the group aspect of how the social exchange theory is implemented in all group settings. For example, in a romantic relationship, everyone seeks a sense of comfort and love and connection with that person that they're with, but at the cost of you being able to give a part of yourself to that person and letting that person in to a part of your life that was probably secluded or you don't want to talk about. But in order to create a relationship with that person, you have to give that person your all at times. Some pros. A pro is that rewards are pleasurable outcomes associated with particular behaviors. For example, in a group, when we all reach a deadline together, or when we all get an A in the class or get an A on a project, that's the reward that took hard work and time. Rewards and costs can take many forms in a group. Fellowship, job satisfaction, achievement, status, and meeting personal needs and goals are all rewards that groups provide. Of course, so for personal goals, like my goal was to meet someone new or get a passing grade with someone in the same class. And hopefully that reward and that goal will be able to be met by the end of the semester. Some cause include such things as mental efforts, anxiety, or even embarrassment. This theory also has its limitation. It does not account for the effects of gender and power relationships in groups. This could positively affect our group in a multitude of ways, of course, especially in the form of reward and costs. For example, we will be rewarded with a passing grade and new connections with people throughout the class, and this is all at the cost of one working towards a passing grade. So all the hard work and effort that we put in to this class or any class will be able to be beneficial to us in the long run in terms of our GPA being higher and us getting a passing grade and us retaining this knowledge that we learned. That is such a positive outcome, especially considering all the hard work that we put towards this. So like I said earlier, the work that we put into our work will be beneficial in terms of our self-satisfaction, our group satisfaction, and we'll be able to meet new people along the way, which is such a positive thing. You'll be able to make new friends and new connections.
Something I found to be very interesting and important to include into the presentation was that many of the scholarly articles that I found on social exchange theory, they all brought in at least one critique or multiple critiques of the theory and how researchers have found different problems or issues or their opinions on the theory over the years as time has progressed. One that came out in almost all of the articles was Catherine Miller's 2005 publication, in which she brought up that she believed that the theory focused more on individual outcome and wouldn't work as well in group-orientated environments. It had potential. It does have potential. But she found that it was more selfish in the way that it explains that when an individual is going through cost and benefit of how they interact, they will leave a certain situation based on solely of what's going to benefit themselves. So she found that to be very not progressive in a group, because you want your group to have the whole entire benefit rather than just thinking about yourself. So that's just something she brought in. Another thing was that it focused more on human exchange as a rational process, and it didn't really calculate how emotions play in human interaction. It brought in that many times that relationships is more linear in nature, and it doesn't really count all the steps that it takes, that some relationships actually go backwards in terms of this is how the relationship is going to progress, or this is how it's going to work out. So she brought that into her publication, and I thought that was very interesting because most of the articles brought that in as well. So that's something that I found to be very interesting, is that particular critique. But a way that that works in our everyday examples is in the workplace. We spend most of our time at our jobs, and it is particularly a give and take, because if you're picking up the slack, if you're picking up the slack for a coworker, you're working out the cost and the benefit of, okay, I'm working to that, I'm picking up all their slack, so what is benefiting me in that way? I mean, it could be that you're progressing, you're moving on with the next project, and the whole group is moving on in the next project, but it's not benefiting you in the way. And that's something that social exchange theory makes clear, is that what is benefiting you as the individual, what is working for you, and what's the cost and benefit, and how do you balance it as the individual. So that's what Catherine Miller wanted to bring up, is that it's very one-sided rather than focusing on all the perspectives. And I know Gio brought in a con that was one of the cons, is that it doesn't focus on all the perspectives, or it doesn't focus on reaching everybody involved. And that's something that the researcher Miller, she wanted to focus on, is that in a group, it probably won't be very helpful, but in other ways, there are other theories that can work towards being successful in a group, but social exchange theory might not be the most, the most strongest, but it does work in terms of what you want to do and what you want to succeed in.
So now I'm going to talk to you about the history of the social exchange theory. So the social exchange theory was first brought up in the late 1950s, and in the span had many contributors, but there's 4 main people who kind of are credited with their creation of this. Now obviously there have been many theorists to come along and kind of work on this, but there's been 4 main people who kind of like laid the groundwork for the social exchange theory, and that was George Human, John Thabit, Harold Kelly, and Peter Blue. And I found this in a book written by Emerson, who is also a theorist who worked on the social exchange theory, and he kind of worked on it in the 1970s, while Human, Thabit, Kelly, and Blue worked on it in the late 1950s and early 60s. So Hume kind of got the ball rolling. He kind of brought up social exchange theory in 1958 when he wrote Social Behavior as Exchange. Now, in this book, he describes social exchange as approval shown through material and non-material goods. He also talks about how when one person gives approval, they expect it back, but they expect it to be better. So if I say you did a good job, I expect you to say I did a great job. If I give you a piece of gum, I expect you to give me a piece of gum, but it's going to be better than the gum I gave you. Then a year later, in 1959, Kelly and Thabit wrote The Social Psychology of Groups, in which they talk about exchanges in group settings and the power group members hold over each other. We all expect approval when we do something good. So when a group member does something good, they're going to expect everyone else to say they did a good job. They're going to expect approval. They're going to expect rewards. So that's kind of what Kelly and Thabit kind of focused on in the social exchange theory. Now, 2 years later, Human writes Social Behavior, Its Elementary Forms, and he revised it in 1974. And in the 1974, he talks about the rewards and the punishment of one's behavior. So we act this way because we expect rewards, or we're going to get punishment. So when we do something good, like hold the door open for someone, we expect a thank you, or we expect them to do it back to us at one point. So we do something because we expect to be rewarded, as why we act like this. But there's also punishments. We know if we sneak out, we're going to get punished. If we get caught. So if we get caught, we're either going to have to do chores or be grounded. So he kind of goes into the depth of why we act this way through social exchange. Now, Peter Blue, who was inspired by George, in 1964 wrote Exchange and Power in Social Life. Now, Kelly and Thabit focused on group settings. George kind of focused on dynamic situations, whereas Blue kind of focused on the economic side and the social structure of the social exchange theory. So he kind of focused on society and the exchanges that society does on the economic side, money. So he goes into depth in that area of social exchange theory. Now, all these theorists, these four theorists, are kind of the creators who worked on different parts from the society side, the group side, the dynad side, had all different parts kind of combined to make this theory. Obviously, there have been other theorists like Richard Emerson and Levi Strauss. So in 1974, Richard Emerson kind of comes along and he expands this theory to relationships, and he talks about the power and the resources and the dependence, which are the main aspects of a relationship. And he kind of goes into the relationship side in the social exchange theory. You know, there's exchanges and there's rewards and there's punishments in relationships, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a marriage, whether it's just girlfriend and boyfriend. There's going to be rewards and there's going to be punishments, and he kind of talks about that. Then Levi Strauss, who is an anthropologist, kind of expands this idea or this theory to gift giving or a generalized exchange. So gift giving, you know, it's my birthday, I expect a gift. Your birthday, you expect a gift. Or if I just randomly decide to get you a gift one day because it made me think of you, you know, I'm going to expect you to do that at one point with me. So the social exchange theory was kind of thought of by many different theorists who kind of worked on different ideas, emphasized different parts of this theory.
So for this part, we're going to be talking about how it plays into major group activity. The activity I used was musicians. So the reason I chose musicians is because on the definition George Huang gives, he states that social exchange approval is shown through material and non-material goods. He also describes as to how the person who gives approval will also want it back. So say for example, a musician, when he's on stage, he's performing, right? But before all that, before performing, before coming out where all our fans are seeing us, there's things we gotta do and accomplish before doing that. Say for example, you're in your practice before going on stage, you gotta dedicate your time, dedicate your life when you're being at the studio, practices, going out, whether you travel out of state when you go play, when you're doing pop-up shops with the whole record label. Not only that, you gotta be able to give your fans what they expect. If you're on stage, you gotta give them what they expect. If you're backstage, you gotta give them what they expect. If you're meeting a fan or going to do something for charity, you know, you gotta give it all for your fans. So there's all these little things that we gotta do in order to, like, you know, keep everybody happy. But most people don't know this. Usually when you're playing, especially when it comes to guitar or by anything with strings, our fingers usually, you get cut up through all your fingers, and through time, you know, you'll get calluses. But in the meanwhile, you know, you're gonna have cuts. Sometimes you might even bleed. So it's dedication we give to our fans. And at the end of the day, you know, what we expect back is gratitude. So there's many ways you can receive back what you give. You know, whether it's money, fame, as most artists might see it, you know, popularity, or if you're a male musician, well, the opposite sex or female. If you're female, well, depending on who you are, male. And there's many different ways we get back from our fans. For me, the perfect way to get back from a fan, you know, when they acknowledge you, when they see you on the street and they ask you for a picture, they ask you questions, they want to meet you, that's the type of reward I feel it's best. You know, money, luxuries come, but when people acknowledge you for your work, it's a beautiful thing.
So, in conclusion, the social exchange theory happens every day, and it can affect our relationships through rewards and punishments, profits and losses. It can help our group in many different ways, through good grades and new friends, but it can also affect us in bad ways, through anxiety, depression. The theory did have some critics that believed it reduced human interaction to a rational process, like a worker in a workplace not getting the credit it deserves. But the theory did have many theorists all working on different parts to create the theory you know today. Holmes working on starting the social exchange theory, working on the dynad, from Peter Blue, who worked on the economic side. There are many different examples of the social exchange theory, from asking someone out on a date, from family to a musician. So the theory happens every day, from a dynad situation to a group setting and in relationships, and that is the social exchange theory. Thank you.